Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere dimly lit, vaguely damp, and absolutely unfit for modern plumbing. You're not a knight, you don't wear armor or read books, you wake up on a straw mat that smells like everything you've ever owned, and that's not a metaphor. Welcome to your very normal morning as a medieval peasant. You probably won't survive this one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with a sneeze. Not from illness, though, that's also very possible, but from the dust falling from the thatch roof above you. It's spring. Allegedly. The air is still cold. Your toes are damp, and you're 60% sure a rat walked across your blanket in the night. Again. Your house is made of sticks, mud, and that same desperate optimism that keeps your roof from collapsing outright. It leans, not in a charming, Pinteresty way, but more like a slow-motion disaster. You hear the chickens shifting in the corner they live with you. Naturally, so does the goat, and your cousin's kid, and possibly a ghost. You never asked. Getting out of bed, if you can call it that, involves removing a wool blanket that might double as a tablecloth if you ever owned a table. Your mattress is a pile of straw that used to be comfortable, until winter turned it into a hay-flavored sponge. The floor is packed dirt, except where it isn't, in which case it's loose dirt, which your foot finds immediately. The sun isn't up yet. It's just a milky gray line along the trees. You don't need a clock. You have internalized the rhythm of daylight so well that your body might sue the sun for breach of contract if it ever slept in. You shuffle toward the hearth. It's not warm. No one stayed up to tend the fire. You were supposed to. But you fell asleep after your niece asked for a story about a cow who could talk. You made it halfway through before both of you were out cold. Starting the fire is more ritual than technique. You say something that might be a prayer or just a complaint. You blow gently on the embers. You strike flint. You try not to curse because your grandmother swears it offends the flame spirits. Your grandmother also believes carrots can predict the weather. It's hard to argue she's still here and the fire eventually starts. You hang a pot over the coals. It contains what's left of last night's dinner, which was also the night before's dinner. This is pottage, the eternal stew. It smells edible. It's grayish, has a thin film on top, and contains exactly one visible pea. You stir it with a spoon made from a tree branch that once got struck by lightning, which makes it special. Apparently. You hear a rooster outside. He sounds like he smokes. He might. You ladle out the pottage into a bowl that was once a nicer bowl, before someone sat on it. It's hot, bland, and vaguely reassuring. You're not thrilled to eat it, but you're glad it exists. Like your uncle. There's no sugar, no salt, no garnish, but you chew with the grim determination of someone who knows there's a full day of weeding, hauling, and pretending to like your neighbors ahead, outside. The village yawns awake. A few doors creak open. Smoke starts rising from nearby huts. A dog barks, or coughs. Hard to tell. You recognize every sound. You've lived here your whole life, so did your parents, and their parents, and probably that goat. The smell of the morning is a powerful cocktail wood smoke, animal funk, wet grass, and yesterday's chores. It's not unpleasant, exactly. It's just familiar. like a sweater made entirely of burlap and emotional damage. You step outside and immediately feel the chill. The dew soaks through your left boot, which has a hole in it. A very specific, unforgettable hole that you always step in with surgical precision. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants wore shoes regularly. The truth is, you do, but barely. Your boots are stitched leather, cracked and patched and more whole than sole. You tie them with twine. It works until it doesn't. Your first task is to check on the animals. You've got 2 chickens, both jerks, a goat highly judgmental, and a pig that looks at you like it knows too much. The pig snorts as you walk past. You snort back. It's mutual respect. The sky is a dull gray canvas. No sign of the sun. But that's normal. You know what kind of day it will be by the feel of the air, the smell of the mud, the way the crows sound extra smug. This will be a long one. You pass your neighbor, old Marjorie, who's already elbow deep in her herb patch. She gives you a nod and mutters something about good worm signs. You pretend to understand. Marjorie is 90, possibly immortal, and once bit a wolf. No one questions her. Across the path, 2 boys argue over who gets to carry the shovel. This is peasant childhood. Equal parts chores, bruises, and a weird obsession with livestock. Back in your hut, the others are stirring. Your brother sneezes 6 times. He does this every morning. No one knows why. Your cousin lights a candle and promptly drops it in the stew pot. The wax adds texture. You glance at the small wooden cross by the hearth. You don't pray loudly, God might be busy, but you nod at it, just in case. Somewhere nearby, a chapel bell rings once. The sound is distant and warped by fog. It's not for you exactly, but it reminds you time's moving. Better get on with it. You grab your hoe, your sack, and your lunch, a piece of bread that could stop a crossbow bolt, and head out to the fields. Your back already aches and the sun's still shy, but the day has begun, and you, somehow, have made it this far. The field greets you like an old friend who owes you money. It's lumpy, uneven, and a little smug about it. You step into the same patch of soil you've walked for years, and it squelches underfoot, as if to say, still here. Today. Like yesterday and probably tomorrow. You're coaxing life out of a stretch of land that mostly prefers death. The crops are modest barley, leeks, maybe some beans if the birds haven't stolen their inheritance. You squint at the rows. They look hopeful, or at least not actively doomed. You grip your hoe like it's a third arm. It's not a great tool, but it's been in the family long enough to deserve a name. You've never given it one. Naming your tools feels dangerous. You named a chicken once. It didn't end well. The dirt is cold and wet in the way that suggests it's considering rebellion. You start digging anyway. The sun is finally trying. It peeks over the horizon, weak and watery like tea made by someone who hates you. Behind you, someone coughs. It's your neighbor, Tobias. He grunts a greeting that may have also been a critique of your hoeing technique. You nod back with equal ambiguity. Working the land isn't poetic. It's mud in your boots, blisters on your hands, and a surprisingly high number of rocks pretending to be potatoes. But it keeps you alive. Barely. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is still sitting like a small brick in your stomach. It wasn't delicious. It was functional, and you respect it for that. You pause to sip water from a leather flask. It's warm. It tastes faintly of goat, which makes sense, since the flask once was a goat. And then you keep digging. The hours stretch. You measure time by shadows and back pain. Somewhere around mid-morning, a breeze rolls in carrying the scent of manure, burning wood, and anxiety. You hear a bell again, faintly. Not the chapel one this time. This is smaller, sharper. It's coming from the woods. You freeze. It's a sound you don't usually hear during planting season, the tinkling jingle of a pilgrim's bell. Sure enough, a figure shuffles into view at the edge of the trees, hooded, hunched, dragging a walking stick, and covered in more dust than dignity. A pilgrim, Tobias mutters. Great, another one. You both return to your hoes. Pilgrims aren't dangerous, not really, but they carry stories like fleas, tales of miracles, plagues, saints, and cities made of stone. They talk about far-off lands like they're just around the bend. You don't trust them. They have shoes that don't leak. Suspicious. Still, the man passes through the field without stopping. You wonder if he's headed to the next village, or maybe just walking forever. Some people do that. Just walk and pray and hope the saints are listening. You'd walk too if you didn't have 3 debts, 2 siblings, and a half-dead goat relying on you. Your back twinges. You stretch. It doesn't help. You think of that story, the one where a saint made wheat grow overnight. You tried praying to that saint last year. The only thing that grew overnight was mold. Still, you muttered a quiet prayer this morning, just in case. The same way you spit on your tools to keep them humble. It's not superstition, it's strategy. The sun creeps higher. Your shirt clings with sweat. A rock slices your palm. You suck the blood from it like it owes you rent. Nearby, Tobias grumbles something about feeling the rain in his shoulder. You look at the sky. Perfectly clear. So naturally. You believe him. By noon, your stomach is empty again. It's confusing because technically, you ate. But your body has decided that whatever it just received was more suggestion than meal. You pull out your lunch, a chunk of bread the color of disappointment, and roughly the consistency of regret. You dip it in water to soften it. It helps. Slightly. The field is quiet. Birds chirp like they know they have better things to do. A bee lands on your sleeve, reconsiders, and leaves. Even the insects think you're beneath them. You wipe your brow and glance at the horizon. Fields stretch for miles. Not yours, just land. Some belongs to the Lord, some to the church. All of it claimed, none of it yours. You imagine what it might be like to own just a sliver of it, enough to say, this patch of mud mine. The thought is almost laughable. Land isn't for people like you. You borrow it, mend it, love it, and then someone else taxes it. Historians still debate whether peasants ever truly believed they could rise. Most say no. Others argue there were whispers, rumors of free towns, generous lords, land grants to brave soldiers. You've heard those whispers, but they're always about someone else. Your hands are dirty. Your knees ache. You lean on your hoe and remember a story someone told last winter about a farmer who married a merchant's daughter and moved to a city where he wore boots every day. No holes. Imagine that. You shake the fantasy away. Back to digging. Back to weeding. Back to trying to make reluctant vegetables obey you. The sun begins to lower. Afternoon slides in like an old dog flopping down beside the fire. You gather your tools. Your bones creak in protest. You ignore them. You always do. On your way home, you spot the pilgrim again. He's kneeling near the village well, hands folded, lips moving. You consider asking him where he's headed, but you don't. You already know the answer. Somewhere better, somewhere not here. You pass Marjorie's hut. Smoke drifts out in lazy curls. You smell rosemary. It makes you think of stew, which makes you realize how hungry you are. Again. The village is quiet. Chickens peck. A baby cries. Someone sings a line of an old song, then forgets the rest. At your door, you pause and glance at the sky. It's turning that bruised color it gets just before dusk. You made it through another day, which means you'll do it again tomorrow. You're not sure how time keeps moving, but it does. Like mud down a hill. Slow, inevitable, and occasionally gross. You've just set your tools by the door. Boots dripping with whatever combination of water, pig drool, and existential fatigue has collected outside. Inside. The hut smells like boiled turnip and desperation. Comforting. Really. Someone started the fire again. Probably your brother. The one with 2 good teeth and a talent for making everything worse by helping. A pot hangs above the flames. And yes, it's pottage. Again, it never left. You glance inside. New addition, a single sad carrot. A luxury. It bobs gently in the watery broth like it's questioning its life choices. You take a seat on the stool. It wobbles like always, threatening to remind you of your lower back's fragile grip on sanity. The rushes on the floor have been changed recently. Recently meaning sometime in the last few weeks. They smell slightly less like mildew, slightly more like goat. Your niece hands you a chunk of bread. It's marginally softer than the one you carried earlier. Progress. You nod your thanks and take a bite. It crumbles. You chew slowly because the bread isn't going anywhere, and neither are you. Around the fire, people start drifting in. Cousins, siblings, one neighbor who just kind of lives here now. No one questions it. Housing's tight, and she makes decent cheese. Dinner conversation is sparse, mostly chewing, occasional sighs, and one wildly inaccurate retelling of a story about a man who married a goose. Everyone acts like it's normal. You join in with a grunt of approval. Goosewife stories are classics. After the meal, the stew simmers on low, which is the only setting. You lean back against the wall, which is slightly damp. You don't care anymore. You're too full of carbs and not enough joy. You stretch your legs and feel something shift in your knee. Could be a tendon. Could be your hopes. Doesn't matter. Outside, night falls like a heavy cloak. You hear the chapel bell again, faint and slightly offbeat. Probably the kid ringing it is tired too. The thing about life here is that it's not dramatic, not usually. It's not about wars or crowns or bold declarations. It's about survival in the slowest, most constant way. Until it's not. Because today isn't like yesterday. Not entirely. Words come from the steward. Tomorrow, you'll be helping harvest the Lord's fields. Corvée labor. It's not unexpected. Just unwelcome. See, a few times a week. You don't work your land, you work his. The land you don't eat from, don't own, and definitely don't get thanked for tilling. You get no pay, no choice, and no illusion that your time belongs to you. You sigh louder than necessary. Someone nods. They get it. One of your cousins mutters that maybe if the Lord's son stopped hunting for imaginary deer, there wouldn't be so much barley left to save from rotting. You stifle a chuckle. It's not safe to joke too loudly. Walls have ears, probably moldy ones. Still, The mood lifts slightly. Sarcasm is a powerful tool in the peasant toolbox. Right next to grin and bear it and pretend this potato is meat. You grab your tunic from a peg near the door. It's damp. It's always damp. But it's yours. Probably. Lying down on the straw mat, you stare up at the beams overhead. They creak in the wind like a ship that's gone nowhere in 40 years. You count knots in the wood, like you do every night. And just as your eyelids start to droop, a cough rattles from the corner. Deep, wet, and unmistakably ominous. It's your neighbor, the one who makes cheese. The hut goes still. Everyone pretends they didn't hear it. The same way they pretended not to notice how pale she looked earlier, or how she hasn't touched her bread in 3 days, or how her hands trembled when she lit the fire. Plague, maybe. A cold, hopefully. A ghost, always an option. You roll onto your side and whisper a prayer. Half to a saint, half to anyone listening. Historians still debate what exactly caused certain medieval epidemics, whether it was tainted water, fleas, astrological misalignment, or just bad luck soaked in worse hygiene. You don't know the answer. You just know what a bad cough sounds like. Sleep comes in shifts. First you drift, then you wake, then you drift again. Your dreams are muddy, full of bread and chickens and a very angry bishop for some reason. You wake before dawn, of course, because it's barley day. You gather your things, your hoe, a sack, and a piece of bread hard enough to qualify as weaponry. The sky is the color of indecision. You join the others. Everyone trudges in the same direction, like ants forced to build someone else's anthill. The Lord's fields are bigger, flatter, cleaner, almost smug. You dig your hands in anyway. The steward stands nearby, watching. He holds a little book he can't actually read, but it makes him feel important. You nod when he looks your way. You work hard. You don't speak. You sweat. You pull. You harvest barley you'll never eat. And all the while, that cough echoes in your head like a bell that hasn't been rung yet. You wonder how long until someone notices. You wonder what will happen when they do. You don't stop working because you can't. Because it's barley day. Because that's just life. And because sometimes the biggest rebellion is simply showing up. Again. You don't remember when you first learned that your life didn't actually belong to you. It wasn't a big moment. No dramatic announcement. Just a slow accumulation of obligations, like mud on your boots. You were born into it. Into the land. Into the debt. Into the quiet understanding that the things you grow, fix, build, and carry well, they're not yours. Not really. Today that reality is louder than usual. You're working the Lord's land again. Barley field, row after row, watched over by a man whose hat is far too clean to be trusted. The steward. He's standing just far enough away to avoid actual labor, but close enough that you can smell his smugness. He doesn't speak much, just mutters, makes marks in a book, and occasionally frowns like that's a form of productivity. You cut stalks, you bind them, you stack them, you move on. It's not complicated, just endless. Your fingers blister, your shoulders burn, and a splinter under your nail is slowly plotting your demise. Tobias is next to you, mumbling curses under his breath. You can't make out the words, but the tone is extremely expressive. This field, like most things, belongs to the local lord, a man who you've seen twice in your life, once on horseback, once while yelling at a dog. He lives up the hill, in a house that doesn't leak. Allegedly, he owns the land, which means he owns the trees, the stones, the stream that sometimes turns colors after rain, and by extension, everything you've ever touched, including you. You are what's called a villain, which sounds vaguely villainous but mostly means peasant, tied to land, legally stuck. You're not a slave, but you're not a slave either. You can't leave without permission. You can't pass your patch of land down without paying for it. You can't marry, move, or mutter too loudly about it all without consequences. Freedom is a concept reserved for people who wear silk and own at least 2 chairs. You know this. Everyone knows this. It's not shocking. It's just the water you swim in. The steward calls your name. Well, he mispronounces it for the 3rd time this week. You nod anyway. He wants to know why your family hasn't delivered the 2 chickens you owed last month. You explain again that the chickens ran away. One into the woods, one into a stew pot you didn't authorize. He scowls, makes another mark. You offer to make it up with eggs. He shrugs. We'll see, he says, like someone about to see nothing. Historians still debate whether the feudal system functioned as mutual obligation or legalized extortion. From your side of the barley field, it feels less like a social contract and more like a particularly condescending ransom note. At midday, you're granted a break. Granted is generous. The steward disappears to sit in shade, so you take the opportunity before he remembers you exist. You pull out your lunch. The bread's still unreasonably hard. You gnaw at it like a very disappointed squirrel. Someone hands you a turnip. No explanation. No thanks required. You eat it like a gift from the turnip gods. A few feet away, someone is talking about a revolt. Not seriously, just remembering one. The Peasants' Revolt in England, 1381. Years ago now. Most people don't talk about it too loudly. But every so often, someone mutters about it the same way people talk about thunderstorms, distant, dangerous, and oddly beautiful. They stormed London, someone says. Didn't last. Someone else adds. Still, Tobias says. I bet it felt good. You all fall quiet after that. Because what can you say? You pick up your tools, you go back to work, you think about what it might feel like to walk into a manor house, track mud on the floor, and demand nothing more than to be left alone. But you also think about your brother, who still owes a loaf to the reeve. You think about the cheese-making neighbor with the cough. You think about your niece, who still believes the fire listens when she sings to it. So you don't revolt. You harvest barley, and later that day, when the steward decides he's counted enough heads, he dismisses you with a wave, like you're a fly that's mildly annoying his paperwork. You don't say anything. You just nod and walk home, because you're tired, and because honestly, you'd like to make it to stew without a lecture about feudal tax codes. The road home is long and silent. Your feet ache. Your face is sunburned in a fun, asymmetrical way. You hear a distant thud. Probably someone dropped a bucket. Probably your brother. When you reach the village, you find your door ajar. Your hut smells faintly of smoke and something almost edible. Your cousin's making stew, new ingredient lentils. You stare at them like they're a rare jewel. Lentils mean someone traded well, or found a forgotten sack behind the hearth, or maybe lied to the steward. You don't ask. You just take a bowl. You sit. You eat. You breathe. You made it through another day. No rebellion. No freedom. Just endurance. You didn't choose religion. It arrived before you, shaped your cradle, and dictated what kind of dirt your grave should touch. It's not a question of belief. It's a question of gravity. You don't float away from it. You just fall into its rhythm. You hear the bell before sunrise. One long, slow note stretched across the fields, as if the village priest is trying to remind the sheep that God is still watching them. You stretch on the straw mat. Every joint sounds like it's making up for lost time. You dress in silence. Your tunic smells like last week. You don't care. The church doesn't mind. Mass is mandatory, or, to be more accurate, expected with consequences. You've been once a week since before you could speak. The priest doesn't call roll. He doesn't need to. He knows when you're not there. Everyone does. Gossip fills in the blanks faster than scripture. You trudge to the chapel, a small stone building that leans slightly, like it's apologizing for not being a cathedral. The wooden door creaks. It always does. Inside, it's colder than outside. The stones hold the chill like secrets. There are no pews. You stand or kneel, sometimes both, depending on how pious you feel. Today, you aim for average. The priest enters. He's young, which is both a comfort and a concern. He means well, but he hasn't yet learned to hide his disdain for your inability to pronounce Latin properly. You don't hold it against him. He's still learning how to deliver sermons without tripping over his robe. He begins the Mass. You understand none of it. The words are in Latin, a language so foreign it may as well be birdsong. You know the sounds. You know when to cross yourself. You even mouth the phrases you've memorized, syllables that feel like music with no meaning. But it works. Somehow. The rhythm of the ritual sinks into you. Not because it makes sense, but because it's predictable. And in a world where the weather, the crops, and your cousin's mood swings remain wildly unstable, predictability is a kind of miracle. The service drifts by. You daydream halfway through about bread, fresh bread, warm bread, bread that doesn't crunch when it isn't supposed to. Then comes the Eucharist. The priest raises the host, says something in a tone that implies God might be hard of hearing, and the entire chapel goes quiet. You feel the hush deep in your spine. You don't fully understand transubstantiation, but you believe in it the way you believe in fire. You don't know how it works. You just know you shouldn't mess with it. You line up with the others, open your mouth, receive the bread. It tastes like nothing, but your soul feels slightly heavier, which is reassuring. After Mass, the priest reminds you all about fasting on Friday. No meat, unless you're rich, in which case you probably own theological loopholes. He also mentions something about Saint Agatha's feast day. You nod. You'll probably remember. Or someone will. Someone always does. On the walk home, someone mutters about indulgences. A priest passed through last month selling pardons for sins, as if holiness came with a price tag. You didn't buy one. You couldn't afford to. You just sin a little quieter now. Historians still debate how much medieval peasants genuinely believed in the church's doctrines, and how much was social inertia. Did you fear hell, or just social exile? Did you pray for salvation, or just better weather? You don't know. You're not a theologian. You're just a person trying not to get struck by lightning while walking near a shrine. Your personal religious rituals are simpler. You cross yourself when passing a shrine. You whisper prayers to saints when the goats act strange. You bury iron nails by the door when someone gets a fever. Your grandmother keeps garlic braided by the hearth. For evil spirits, she says. Also, soup. There's a candle stub you light every Thursday. No one remembers why. Probably a vow someone made during a flood 2 generations ago. You keep doing it, because that's how traditions work. No one remembers the rule. But no one wants to test what happens if you stop. Your favorite saint is Saint Isidore, patron of farmers. Makes sense. You've said his name more times than your own. But you also whisper to Saint Leonard for protection, and Saint Apollonia because your teeth have been plotting mutiny since Lent. You don't understand the structure of heaven, but you trust that someone up there is listening, or at least not actively ignoring you. You once dreamed of a saint visiting your hut. He said nothing, just sat by the fire and watched the stew bubble. You woke up hungry but calm. You didn't tell anyone. It felt like a secret. You pray before sleep, briefly, not with fanfare, just a quiet thought into the dark. You ask for rain, for patience, for your niece to stop biting the chickens. You ask for your own soul, but only out of habit. And when things go well, when the barley grows thick and the roof holds all winter, you don't congratulate yourself. You light a candle. You nod at the cross. Because if someone is keeping score, you want your name written clearly. Bathing, in your world, is not a ritual of luxury. It's more of a tactical maneuver, scheduled loosely around the availability of water, the alignment of the stars, and the psychological weight of how many people have pointed out that you smell like onions. You start the day smelling like a barn. That's because you share your home with at least one animal, 3 people, a moldy wall, and something in the rafters that makes clicking noises at night. You've accepted this. Hygiene isn't about being clean. It's about being cleaner than usual. There's a basin in the corner. It's seen better decades. You fill it with cold water from the well, which is slightly less green today. Progress. You dunk your hands in. That alone is a shock to the system. Full body immersion is not happening. You splash your face. That's enough. You scrub your arms. You rinse behind your ears. You pretend your feet don't exist. The rest you'll cover with layers and hope. Soap is rare. When you do have it, it's made of lye and animal fat. It smells like optimism dipped in beef. It burns your skin slightly, which, according to Marjorie, means it's working. Your hair is a lost cause. It's part straw, part grease, and fully committed to being unruly. You tie it back with twine and move on. There's no mirror, just a puddle outside that sometimes reflects your face. It looked concerned this morning. That felt accurate. Bathing properly requires heating water, pouring it into a wooden tub, and closing the door to keep out wind, goats, and nosy cousins. Which means it happens only on feast days, special occasions, or when someone loses a bet. You once bathed twice in 1 week. People were suspicious. Historians still argue about medieval bathing habits. Some say peasants washed weekly. Others claim they bathed with the frequency of lunar eclipses. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between surprisingly often and only when the lice start writing memoirs. Lice are a constant. You've named at least 3. You try your best combing, boiling your tunic, offering whispered threats, but they return like bad news and unpaid tithes. You don't love them, but you've accepted the relationship as mutually unwanted. Public bathhouses exist. Somewhere. Not here. Maybe in a city. Maybe behind a paywall. In your village. Bathing is solitary, awkward, and always involves someone knocking just as you get your second arm wet. Once a year, a peddler comes through selling herbal water. He says it'll make your skin glow. He also claims he's met a unicorn. You bought a vial once. It smelled like pickled rosemary. Your skin didn't glow, but the goat stopped biting you. Maybe it worked. There's a stream near the edge of the woods. In summer, you sometimes wade in. Not to swim. Swimming is what people in stories do. You just stand in the shallows, let the mud squish between your toes, and try to forget that there's a fish staring at you like it knows your secrets. Washing your clothes is its own battle. You boil them when you can, beat them against rocks when you must, and mostly hang them over the hedge to dry while hoping the dog doesn't mistake them for bedding. Again, your best tunic, the one without visible holes, is for church and funerals. You wear it maybe 5 times a year. It smells like beeswax and reverence. You keep it folded in the chest under garlic and hope. Children get bathed more often, not because they're cleaner, but because they're smaller and easier to dunk without resistance. Your niece shrieks like a banshee every time. She insists the water bites. You don't argue. She's probably right. Winter bathing is a whole different tragedy. The water freezes. The tub freezes. You freeze. The soap cracks. You cry. You try to time your winter baths around bonfire days, stand near flames. Wipe down with a damp cloth. Convince yourself that steam counts as scrubbing. The church encourages cleanliness, but only to a point. They care more about moral purity than actual dirt. A clean soul matters more than clean armpits. Although, some monks have written entire scrolls about the spiritual danger of excessive bathing. One even claimed too much cleanliness tempts vanity. You're not in danger of that. Once, a friar visited your village and spoke of Roman bathhouses, marble pools, scented oils, servants pouring warm water from golden bowls. You and your neighbors laughed for 3 days. Then you cried a little. You've never even seen marble. Bathing aside, personal grooming is minimal. You trim your nails with a knife. You cut your hair when it starts catching on things. Your teeth, well, they exist. Mostly. Toothache is a common enemy. You chew mint leaves, rub salt on your gums, and whisper to Saint Apollonia. She's the patron saint of dental pain. You lit a candle to her last spring. It didn't fix the tooth, but it gave you a warm 5 minutes and a good story. There's a saying in your village, clean enough not to offend the sheep. That's the bar. You aim slightly higher on holy days, slightly lower when it rains for a week straight. And somehow, despite it all, you don't smell that bad. Not to yourself. You smell like wood smoke, wool, and a hint of stew. Your people, your place, your scent. You know one thing for sure in a world that rarely offers comfort. A splash of cool water, a clean shirt, and 5 minutes without being judged by a pig are enough to feel almost human. The word celebration does a lot of heavy lifting in your village. It doesn't mean confetti, parades, or fireworks. It means a day where the bread is a little less stale and people don't sigh quite as loudly. Welcome to a feast day medieval edition. You wake up to the sound of bells, louder than usual. The priest rang them like he meant it, which means today is important, probably a saint's day, or the anniversary of a miracle involving sheep. No one's entirely sure, but there's going to be food. That's all anyone needs to know. You stretch, and your back cracks like firewood. You slip on your good tunic, the one with only 2 holes in it, and step outside into air that smells faintly of fresh bread and overly hopeful expectations. Your niece is already running in circles. Someone gave her honey. You suspect it was Marjorie. She's sitting by her door holding what might be a pie. It's round. It smells like apples, and it's already missing a corner. She gives you a wink. You nod back. Respect. Feast days start early. The entire village moves with a different rhythm, faster, lighter, and with just a hint of chaos. Chickens are shuffled out of the way. Kids scrubbed until they squeak. Even the pigs look vaguely excited, possibly because someone dropped a turnip. You head to the green, the muddy patch near the chapel that serves as celebration central. A few tables have been dragged out. One's missing a leg and currently held up by Faith and a bucket. Someone's brought out a jug of cider. It's already half empty. Of course it is. The priest is there, holding a cross and a cup and looking both holy and slightly overwhelmed. He says something about Saint Bridget, or maybe Saint Bernard. The saints blur together sometimes. Either way, someone once performed a miracle, and now you're allowed to eat slightly more food than usual. You all cross yourselves. You all nod solemnly. And then the real miracle begins, the sharing of the egg. One whole egg, boiled, carefully peeled, cut with the precision of a surgeon and passed around like a relic. It's delicious. It tastes like triumph. Next comes the bread, actual soft bread, with a crust that doesn't require dental combat. A nearby family brought cheese. You eye it with reverence. It's shaped like a wheel but looks like salvation. You get a piece. You cry quietly, internally. Then comes the stew. It's still pottage, but with extras, carrots, actual bits of meat, herbs you can name. It smells like someone cared. You ladle a bowl and sit on the ground, because chairs are for the clergy and the goats that steal them. You eat slowly, like the stew might vanish if you move too fast. You chew, you breathe, you smile, you forget, just briefly, how thin the walls of your home are and how thick the mud by your door has become. Someone starts singing. A half-song, half-memory tune about a sailor and a cow. It makes no sense, and everyone joins in. You hum along, adding your own verse about a chicken with ambition. No one questions it. You're a creative genius. Historians often portray medieval feast days as rare, solemn affairs. But there's plenty of debate. Some argue that peasants celebrated more than we give them credit for every saint's day, major harvest, and minor miracle an excuse to gather, eat, and remember what joy feels like. You believe that? You live that. Because on days like this, the world opens up a little. You share jokes that have no punchlines. You dance like your knees aren't plotting against you. You clap along while someone tries to play a lute that's missing 2 strings and most of its dignity. You remember last year's feast, how the bread caught fire and the pig chased the priest. Good times. This year, someone brought a pie, an actual pie. Thick crust, dark filling, possibly berries, possibly plums, possibly something else. You don't care. You get a slice. It's warm. It's perfect. You sit with your cousin, the one who once tried to make wine from potatoes. He's humming. You're full. And the sun, somehow, is shining. There's a moment quiet, but full when you realize everyone is smiling at once. That never happens. Not even during harvest. Not even during weddings. But today, with stew in your belly and music in your ears, you feel something dangerous, contentment. and then someone starts dancing. It begins with one person, a bold move, possibly cider-inspired, then 2, then 6. You're dragged in before you can protest. The steps are chaotic, half stumbling, half skipping, completely unsynchronized. You almost fall. You laugh instead. You dance with your niece, with your neighbor, with the steward's son, who's too drunk to know his own name. You twirl in the mud. You pretend you're royalty. You slip. You don't care. This isn't elegance. This isn't glory. This is life, wrapped in the momentary illusion of freedom. Eventually, the sun dips. The air cools. People wander home with tired smiles and pockets full of leftover crusts. You help clean. You sweep with a branch. You stack bowls. You wave at Marjorie, who somehow still has pie. You nod at the priest, who's pretending not to stagger. Back home, your tunic is stained. Your feet hurt. Your hands are sticky with something that might have once been fruit. You lie down on the straw. Your family is asleep. The hut creaks with satisfaction. Your stomach is full. Your heart is quieter. It was a good day. 1 egg, some stew, a dance, and a story. That's all it took. And for tonight, it's enough. You've thought about leaving, not in the dramatic, storm out of the village, middle of the night sort of way. More in the quiet, standing by the well, staring at the trees kind of way. The thought sneaks in sometimes, right between chores and exhaustion. What's beyond the woods? What's past the hill? What's it like to see a town square not made entirely of mud and judgment? You've never traveled more than a few miles. That's normal. Most people here haven't. The world beyond your village is theoretical. You've heard of cities, places with buildings 2, even 3 stories tall, streets made of stone, people who wear shoes just for style. It sounds absurd, like pigs that do taxes. The road leading out of your village is more of a suggestion than a path. It winds into the trees, muddy in spring, frozen in winter, and covered in something suspicious the rest of the year. You know it leads somewhere. You just don't know where. And frankly, no one else seems to either. Last time someone left old Jory's cousin, Alan, he returned 3 months later, missing a shoe, half his beard, and any sense of direction. Said he made it as far as a market town before he got mugged by a horse. You didn't ask follow-up questions. It felt rude. Travel is dangerous. Not the good kind of dangerous. The kind that ends with you being robbed, lost, or worse, forced to talk to a stranger. There's no map, no signs. The directions are always the same. Go until you see the tree shaped like an old woman's back. Then turn toward where the sun used to rise. You don't speak any other dialects. You don't carry coin. You barely understand the customs in your village, let alone someone else's. It's like being born into a very boring cult that occasionally throws eggs at people from the next hamlet over. Still, the idea tickles your brain sometimes. What if historians still debate how trapped peasants really were? Some say mobility was possible with the right permissions, the right bribes, or the right church backing. Others argue most peasants didn't want to leave, not because they lacked imagination, but because they lacked margin for risk. If you fail out there, you don't get a second chance. You just disappear into a ditch, back in your hut. Your cousin asks you to fetch water. You stare at the well and briefly consider just walking past it. You don't, because the sheep need penning. and your grandmother needs more rushes, and your brother still can't remember how to tie a decent bundle of firewood. The village needs you, and you need it. Even if it's small. Even if it smells like wet hay and broken promises, you head to the well. On the way, you pass the old fence that marks the edge of the village. Beyond it, trees, just trees. Nothing sinister, nothing magical, just green, rustling life. Deep and quiet and full of things that don't care whether you live or die. You once heard a story about a man who followed the river past the woods. Said he found a house made of glass. No one believed him. But he kept telling the story, even when people stopped listening, especially then. There's a woman in the next village over. They say she visited a city. She returned wearing shoes made of cloth and an expression like she'd seen God eating olives. She didn't talk much after that. Just made soap and watched the road. You've met merchants, monks, a wandering singer who insisted he was famous. They come and go, trailing smells of pepper and ideas. You stare at them like relics. They stare at you like part of the landscape. Neither of you understands the other. Once, you found a piece of paper in the road, writing on it. Curly, elegant lines like a bird dancing. You couldn't read it. You tucked it into your belt anyway. Still have it, just in case. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to wake up in a place where no one knows your name, where no one expects anything, where your past doesn't arrive before you do. But then you look at the fields, the well, the hut with the slightly collapsed side that you've been meaning to fix for 3 winters. You look at your niece chasing a chicken, the same chicken she always tries to name, and you feel something strange belonging. It's not adventure. It's not glory. It's familiarity. You know who to borrow a spade from. You know which door creaks when someone sneaks out. You know which patch of sky tells you when it's going to rain. Leaving is tempting, but staying is survival. You haul the water back. You nod at Marjorie, who mutters something about signs in the clouds. You step over the loose stone that tripped you last week. You return home, because today, your job is to be here, and maybe tomorrow, too. The cough is worse. You hear it before you open the door, deep, wet, dragging itself out of your neighbor like it's trying to escape. The same neighbor who makes cheese, who once danced with a pig on a feast day and claimed it was a religious experience. The same neighbor who hasn't eaten in 3 days and now barely lifts her head. You don't speak. You just nod, gently, and ladle her a bit of the morning stew. It's mostly water now, with a whisper of barley. She takes it, doesn't look at you, sips once, and drifts back into sleep or something like it. You return to the hearth. Someone's added turnip skins. Probably your brother. You don't ask. The hut feels quieter today. Not because there's less noise, someone's baby is crying outside. And a rooster has decided to express himself through interpretive squawking, but because you're listening harder. For signs. Sickness is part of life. Always has been. A sniffle, a chill, a sore tooth that turns into an abscess and ruins your entire month. A scratch that festers. A fever that starts small and ends in silence. But this feels different. You first heard of the illness a week ago. A traveler muttering something about a village by the river half gone. Black spots, foaming mouths, quick deaths. You hoped he was exaggerating. Now you're not so sure. You slip outside. The air is sharp, but the sky is beautiful. pale and high and utterly uncaring. You step into the lane. Marjorie is sprinkling herbs across her doorway. Rosemary, sage, something else that smells like burnt onions. Plague, she says, like she's ordering bread. You ask if she's certain. She gives you a look, the kind that says, "You know better than to ask stupid questions when I'm holding mugwort." The village is unsettled. People are quieter. Movements are smaller. The laughter's stopped, replaced by the soft shuffle of worry. Even the pigs are subdued. They sense things. You've always thought so. You head toward the well. There's a gathering. Not a crowd, just a cautious knot of villagers who've all decided to fetch water at the same exact moment without planning to. Funny how that happens. No one talks about the neighbor, but everyone glances in the direction of her hut. You draw your water quickly. Someone asks if she's still coughing. You nod. Someone else crosses themselves, and no one says the word, but it's in the air. Historians still debate the exact arrival points of medieval plagues, how fast they spread, what routes they took, how many waves they came in. You don't know any of that. You just know that things feel wrong, like the wind has changed direction, and no one noticed except the animals and the bones in your knees. The priest says it might be divine punishment. The steward says it's rats. Your cousin says it's definitely the new cheese recipe. Everyone has a theory. No one has a solution. People burn herbs. They stuff garlic in their sleeves. They tie bits of cloth around their faces soaked in vinegar. You do the same, even though it just makes you smell like salad. You whisper to the saints. You light a candle. You check the stew for mold. You keep moving, because standing still feels dangerous. The next morning, the cheesemaker is gone. Her cousin finds her, still, cold, eyes half open. There's no ceremony. The priest comes, says the words. No bell rings. No one has the energy. You help bury her. Shallow grave, near the edge of the woods. Not because you want to be cruel, but because no one wants her too close. You say nothing. You just press your hand to the earth after it's done and whisper a goodbye that sticks in your throat. The days stretch. The cough spreads. Slowly. First one child. Then a man who works the Lord's stable. Then a girl barely old enough to chase chickens. The village shrinks. People stop visiting each other. Meals are eaten in silence. The priest walks alone. You stop using the communal well. You start boiling water. You try not to touch your face. You try not to breathe too deeply. You try not to hope too hard. You hear a story another village sealed their doors, refused all visitors, and burned anything that looked suspicious. Saved half their people, lost the rest. You consider doing the same, but your people are tired and frightened and too deeply tangled with each other to separate now. So you stay. You take care of the sick. You leave bowls of food at doorways. You light more candles than ever. You sing softly, even when no one joins in. And at night, when the hut is quiet and the fire is low, you lie awake and listen. Not for laughter, not for wind, but for the sound of one more cough. You try to sleep, but sleep has requirements: peace, silence, a mind not carrying 30 unpaid debts, and the echo of a death rattle. Tonight you have none of those. The hut is dark, lit only by the final flickers of a low fire. Your family sleeps around you, some snoring softly, others turning in their straw, all of them too close and not close enough. Your back is against the wall. Your legs are curled awkwardly to avoid someone's feet. The pig is making noises again somewhere between breathing and judgment. You try not to think about what's crawling in the rafters, and then you hear it. A thump, not loud, but deliberate, followed by a strange rustle, like someone dragging a heavy bag of grain or possibly their regrets. You freeze, because in this place, after dark, sounds take on extra meaning. You listen hard. Was it the wind, a raccoon, the ghost of old Jory finally seeking revenge for that goat incident? Your heart beats louder than your breath. A few moments pass. Nothing. Silence regrows around you like moss. You ease back into your mat, and then the goat snorts directly into your ear. You jolt so hard you kick over a bucket. No one wakes up. The goat stares at you like you're the problem. You sigh. This is your night now. Sleep in medieval times isn't one long slumber. It comes in phases: first sleep and second sleep. You've heard it's normal. One stretch just after dusk, then a wakeful period around midnight for prayers. Thoughts. Checking the stew hasn't developed a consciousness. Then second sleep. If you're lucky. Right now, you're between the two. So you get up. The fire needs tending. You poke it with a stick until it grumbles back to life. The orange glow spills across the hut, catching on hanging herbs in the faint shape of someone's elbow. You sip water, lukewarm, slightly smoky. Everything tastes of smoke these days. The wind whistles outside. The thatch shifts above. One small leak starts again, dripping into the bucket you placed 2 weeks ago. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then nothing. This is the part of night when thoughts sneak in. You wonder how many more will fall ill, whether your niece will stay healthy, whether the stew can handle another week without meat, whether the saints are still listening. You wrap a blanket around your shoulders. It smells like sheep and mildew and home. You sit by the fire and think about dreams, not the sleeping kind, the other kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that slip in when the world is quiet and remind you there might be more than barley fields and mud floors and shoes made of patchwork shame. You dream of owning a bed, a real one, with wood carved into shapes that don't threaten splinters. You dream of bread so soft it folds, of songs sung by strangers, of books, real ones, with pages that crackle and stories that don't end in chores. You dream of stars, of seeing the ocean, of waking up somewhere you don't recognize but don't fear. And then the goat farts. Dream over. You lie back down. Try again. Second sleep comes slowly, like a reluctant guest. You drift. Not fully, just enough. You dream that your hut is floating, that it sails down a river of fireflies, that everyone is still asleep, but the pig is steering and the goat is navigating by starlight. You smile in your sleep, but morning comes anyway. It always does. You wake to the sound of a rooster with boundary issues and a baby crying like it just discovered injustice. You stretch. Your bones resist. The fire's dead again. Of course it is. You roll up your mat, step over 3 people, trip on your own tunic, stub your toe on a rock that shouldn't even be in the hut. Someone hands you a piece of bread. You eat it without tasting. Outside, the sun is pale and watery, like it partied too hard last night. You step into the lane and find out someone else is coughing now. You don't ask who. You already know. You hear your name called gently, like a question. It's Marjorie. She's holding a sprig of yarrow and a bowl of something green. You know better than to ask what's in it. You just drink. It tastes like punishment. She hands you a charm, a little bundle of cloth with a bone and a feather and a bit of string. Hang it above the door, she says. Keep the demons confused. You thank her. She nods, then spits on her own doorstep 3 times and mutters at the sky. You hang the charm. Because honestly, what do you have to lose? Sleep didn't help, but somehow, you're ready for the day. Because even without rest, you've built something else. A kind of endurance. You're in the woods now. Not deep, just past the fields, where the trees start leaning in and the air feels heavier, like it's carrying old secrets. You're here to gather firewood, or herbs, or maybe just to breathe somewhere that doesn't smell like goats. The woods are where boundaries blur, between land and not land, between people and whatever watches from the shadows. You walk carefully, not because you're scared, but because you've learned to respect the things that don't explain themselves. There's a narrow trail, barely visible, lined with nettles and moss. You follow it like you've done since childhood, stepping over roots that know your name. You spot a patch of nettles, perfect for soup, if you're desperate, which you usually are. You tie the leaves in a scrap of cloth and keep moving. You hum softly to let the forest know you're just visiting. Marjorie once told you never to take from the same tree twice. They remember, she said, tapping her temple like she had bark in her blood. You believe her, mostly because she's terrifying, but also because, well, some trees do feel like they're watching. You find a fallen branch, dry and perfect for firewood. You pick it up, then another. You build a small pile, and then you hear it a low creak. Not a branch, something else. You freeze, nothing moves. You exhale slowly. Could be a deer, could be nothing. Could be that man from last spring who claimed he lived with foxes now. You start to turn back. You have enough wood, enough air, enough goosebumps. Then you see the stone. Half buried, carved, moss-covered. You hadn't noticed it before. It looks like a marker old, possibly Roman, possibly just wishful thinking. Someone scratched something into it, a line of circles and slashes, or maybe letters from a language no one speaks anymore. You stare. You don't touch it. You're not stupid. Back home, you ask your grandmother if she knows what it is. She nods once, then changes the subject. Historians still debate how much medieval peasants knew about the ancient world Roman roads, old shrines, ruins tucked behind hedgerows. Some say they ignored them. Others claim they folded them into folklore ancient gods rebranded as grumpy forest spirits. You've never seen a Roman, but you've seen stones that hum when the wind hits them right. You gather herbs, wild thyme, maybe feverfew. You can't always tell. You collect them anyway. Marjorie will know what they're for, or she'll invent something. Both outcomes are useful. You find a feather, white, long, slightly curved. You tuck it behind your ear. Feathers are luck, unless they're black, or crooked, or from a goose named Henry. You once tried to make your own charm, stuffed a pouch with rose petals, bark, and a coin. It worked, in the sense that you didn't die that week, but the pig trampled it, so maybe it was too powerful. You head back through the trees, arms full, mind half in storyland, and then on the edge of the clearing you see her, a woman, not from the village. You know everyone. She's wrapped in a faded cloak, hood drawn up, feet bare. She's watching you. You stop. She doesn't speak. You nod. She nods back. And then she disappears into the trees. No sound. No trail. You blink. Did that happen? You walk faster. Back home. You say nothing. Just unload your wood. Hand the herbs to Marjorie, who sniffs them and mutters. Too soon for time. You sit by the fire. You think about the stone, the feather, the woman. And suddenly, the woods feel farther away than they did this morning. That night, you dream of roots growing up through your floorboards. You don't tell anyone. Some stories are better left under the moss. It hasn't rained in 57 days. That's what the steward says. Anyway, you didn't count. You just noticed that the mud dried into brittle cracks and the river shrank until it looked more like someone spilled water than something that once carried fish. Your field is dust. You drag your hoe across the surface and it puffs like flour. Nothing wants to grow. The seeds lie stubborn in the ground, curled up like they're waiting for a better time to exist. You can't blame them. You sort of feel the same. There's no wind, just sun. Relentless, white-hot, joyless sun. It's supposed to be a source of life, but lately it feels more like a punishment. Your skin is tight and red. Your tongue sticks to your teeth. You'd sweat if you had anything left to sweat with. You check the well every morning. The rope creaks louder than the bucket splashes. That's not a good sign. You've started rationing. 1 ladle per person, 2 for stew, none for anything else. Baths are a fantasy. Dishwashing is optional. The goat is starting to look at you like it's in charge now. And still, no rain. The priest says it's a trial. The steward says it's your fault. Your cousin says we're cursed because someone forgot to hang the garlic on the eastern wall. Everyone's a theorist now. You spend a lot of time staring at clouds that don't exist. Some nights, you think you smell rain, just for a second, but it's always smoke or hope or the river's last breath. Historians argue whether droughts caused revolts or merely revealed existing cracks. Either way, when the rain stops, something in people starts to break. You see it in your neighbors. Marjorie's garden is down to 3 wilting onions and 1 very smug-looking weed. Tobias has started pacing. His wife just hums to herself now. Even when nothing's happening, you'd hum too. But your mouth is dry and you can't remember the tune. The animals suffer first, then the crops, then the people. It's a sequence everyone knows, but no one says out loud. You dig deeper pits for water. Nothing. You walk to the river. It's not gone, but it's not really there either. Just a lazy trickle through cracked stone. You dip a pot in and bring it home, pretending you're not scooping up disappointment. You hear of another village down the road. Their well went dry a week ago. They sent a boy to the woods to pray. He hasn't returned. Some think wolves. Others think the trees took him. Marjorie's considering a ritual. Herbs, chanting, blood from a chicken that hasn't yet sinned. You nod supportively and hand her a sprig of something vaguely medicinal. You dream of rain, thick, cold, pounding rain. It drums on the roof like it's angry. It floods the hearth. You float in your sleep. You wake up and your blanket is soaked in sweat. Or maybe wishful thinking. The church organizes a procession. Everyone walks through the fields barefoot, heads bowed, chanting old words. You feel the dirt under your feet like bone. It doesn't respond. Later, a child throws a rock at the sky. Nothing happens. The food stocks shrink. You try to make stew from turnip skins and crushed beans. It tastes like effort. You eat it anyway. A boy gets sick. Dehydration. His lips crack. His eyes dull. His mother cries like she's trying not to. You give them your ladle. You go without. Your brother suggests stealing water from the steward's store. You don't say no, but you don't say yes either. You just sit outside, watching the horizon, trying to will the sky to feel guilty. Once, you hear thunder. Everyone hears it. They stop in their tracks, stare at the sky, mouths open like catching rain in advance. But it passes. No drops. Just the echo of a promise broken too soon. The next morning, you hear birds, not many, just one, singing, loudly, cheerfully, rude, really. You throw a stone in its general direction. It misses. The bird keeps singing. By midday, clouds roll in. Real ones. Thick, gray, heavy. People emerge from their homes like blinking moles. Someone falls to their knees. The priest crosses himself 6 times. Then, finally, rain. One drop, then another, then hundreds. Cold and glorious and wet. You tilt your head back and let it smack your face like it's trying to apologize. You laugh. You cry. The goat bleats dramatically. The earth drinks greedily. The well starts refilling. The river sighs with relief. And for the first time in weeks, you feel clean inside and out. That night, no one cooks. Everyone just sits in the soft drizzle and lets the sound do the talking. It's not a full miracle, but it's close. You've never seen a night before. Not a real one. Not one with the shiny bits. The kind that clinks when he walks and smells like steel and horse. The kind who arrives unannounced and throws the whole village into chaos before breakfast. It starts with the hooves. You hear them first thunder soft, but certain. Not the local kind. Not a cart. These are purpose hooves. Dramatic hooves. You poke your head out the door just in time to see a horse so big it could be mistaken for divine punishment. And on top of it, a man wrapped in metal like a particularly determined sardine. The village freezes. Someone drops a bucket. Your niece says, "Whoa," which might be the first time she's used that tone unironically. The knight dismounts with the precision of someone who's done this in front of mirrors. He removes his helmet. His hair does that slow motion thing like he's in a play. Everyone stares, except the goat. The goat headbutts his leg. Bold. The knight chuckles. Of course he does. His teeth are too clean. He says he's here on business. No one knows what that means. The priest offers him stew. He declines. You know something's up. A crowd forms. Carefully, peasants aren't known for subtlety, but they've got curiosity down to an art. You linger at the edge. Not too close, you've seen what happens to people who draw attention during unexpected night visits. They end up conscripted, cursed, or in a bard song they didn't approve. The knight says he's looking for able-bodied volunteers. That's medieval for I need backup, and I don't care if you've got chores. Everyone starts making themselves look unwell. Someone coughs with intention. Your cousin starts limping dramatically. The goat pretends to be dead. You consider joining it, but then the steward appears, and things change. Because the steward loves nothing more than volunteering other people for things that don't involve his own hands. He points, names, gestures directly at you. You smile in that way that means no, thank you, and I curse you and your entire ancestry simultaneously. The knight approaches, up close. His armor is dented, his face not quite heroic, a little too tired. He smells like road and responsibility. "You look strong," he says. "You think about lying. You think about fainting. You think about suddenly remembering a very contagious goat-borne illness. But instead, you nod. Because you've made worse decisions. You and two others, Tobias and Marjorie's son, are told to pack for 3 days. Bring nothing you can't carry. The knight will explain later, which is always comforting. You gather your things, a small satchel, bread that could double as a weapon, a cloak that might be more whole than fabric. You stuff in a dried turnip for luck. The pig watches you go, judging. Your family doesn't say much. No tearful goodbyes. Just a few nods, a slap on the back, a whispered, "Don't do anything stupider than usual." You leave at dawn. The village watches, a few wave, the rest just blink, like you're already a story they'll retell over stew. You walk behind the knight. His armor squeaks. The sun rises. The road is dust. The knight doesn't talk for a while, just rides. Occasionally drinks from a flask that smells like desperation. Eventually, he says something about bandits near the pass. Says there's been trouble. A merchant went missing. A cart overturned. Cattle gone. You ask if he has a plan. He says, more of a hunch. You miss your pig. That night. You camp in a clearing. The knight tries to catch a rabbit. Fails. You eat bread and pretend it's stew. Someone tells a joke. It's not funny. You laugh anyway. You stare at the stars. They look the same out here. The next day, you find the merchant cart. It's been ransacked. Goods gone. Tracks leading off into the trees. The knight swears. Not impressively. Then he does something odd. He pulls out a book. Leather-bound. Tiny writing. He flips through it like it contains answers. You ask what it is. He says, "The Chronicle of Lost Causes." You don't ask follow-up questions. That night, you don't sleep much. You dream of your hut, of stew, of the goat. The next morning, there's smoke on the horizon. The night tells you to stay close, and just like that, your world gets bigger than your field. The smoke smells wrong. Not hearth smoke, not cooking fire. This is bitter, oily, the kind that clings to your hair and your thoughts. It curls into the sky in thin tendrils, too purposeful for accident. You and the others stand at the tree line, watching it like you're waiting for it to apologize. The knight doesn't hesitate. He dismounts, draws his sword with a dramatic shing that sounds suspiciously well rehearsed, and strides forward like someone with nothing left to prove. His armor still squeaks, a little less majestically in the forest. You follow, reluctantly, carefully. Marjorie's son whispers that he left his lucky bone at home. Tobias mutters that if he dies, someone better feed his cat. You agree to both. The path leads to a clearing flattened grass, broken cartwheels, and a circle of scorched earth where something clearly went wrong. There's a body. You try not to look. You fail. It's a merchant, or what's left of one, burned around the edges, twisted like old rope, with coins scattered like breadcrumbs around him. The knight kneels, grim-faced. "Too late," he mutters, as if he expected otherwise. You stay back, pretending to be useful by examining a nearby bush very intensely. Historians debate how often peasants actually saw death like this: sudden, violent, political. Most of the time, death comes slow, a fever, a bad fall, the long fade out. But out here in the woods, death still has teeth. The night tells you to search for signs. You don't know what signs look like, but you nod and start poking the underbrush like it owes you money. You find a boot print, probably human, maybe large squirrel. Marjorie's son finds a scrap of cloth, red-dyed wool, torn on a bramble. The night takes it, sniffs it weird, and tucks it away like it's a clue in a mystery novel. Which, to be fair, this is starting to feel like. He says, they went northeast. You don't ask how he knows. You don't want to know. You hike all afternoon. The woods thicken, shadows stretch. You hear birds, but not the usual ones. Strange chirps, too rhythmic, like nature's trying to send you a warning in Morse code. By dusk, you reach a stream and stop. No fire tonight, the night says. They might see it. You're cold. You're tired. You miss your stew. But you nod, because the alternatives are worse. You eat dry bread again. You chew slowly. It tastes like regret and old flour. The night finally speaks more. Says his name is Sir Lorien. Says he's not from around here. Says he once rode with a company of 30. Now it's just him. You ask what happened. He doesn't answer. Instead, he tells you about bandits. Not the romantic kind, no charming rogues here. Just desperate men with nothing to lose and a taste for caravan loot. He says they take what they want, burn the rest, and leave no one behind. You ask why he's after them alone. He shrugs. Someone has to care. You try to decide if that's noble or just unhinged. Later that night, you wake to rustling. Not animal rustling, two-legged rustling. You sit up, slowly. Your hand finds the stick you keep by your side. You're not brave, but you're not unarmed. The knight's already on his feet, sword drawn, eyes sharp. The rustling stops. You hear a whisper, then silence. Sir Lorien moves into the trees like a shadow made of iron. You stay behind, like a shadow made of anxiety. He doesn't come back for an hour. When he does, he's carrying a pouch of stolen goods and a nasty gash on his arm. They're close, he says. You want to ask if you're part of a rescue party or a vengeance squad, but you just hand him a strip of cloth to wrap the wound. He nods, grateful. The blood seeps through quickly. You pretend not to notice. The next day, you find the bandit camp. It's smaller than you expected. Just 4 men, rough clothes, hungry eyes. One of them isn't much older than your niece. He's skin and bones wrapped in bravado. Sir Lorien doesn't wait. He steps out of the brush and announces himself like he's at a royal banquet. Return what you've stolen, he says, or face judgment. They laugh. It's a mistake. He moves fast. You don't see much. Just flashes of metal. The sound of breath leaving lungs. The wet smack of consequences. It's over in minutes. 3 bandits run, 1 doesn't. The night doesn't chase. You and the others emerge slowly, hearts pounding. You gather what's left. Some coins, a silver ring, a ledger no one can read, a cracked lute, and the merchant's seal. Sir Lorien burns the camp. You don't ask why. You don't need to. On the way back, no one talks. Not even the night. When you reach your village, people barely recognize you. Dirt covered, hungry, smelling of fire and answers no one asked for. Your niece screams when she sees you, then hugs you so hard you nearly collapse. You hand your mother the last bit of bread you didn't eat. She stares, then smiles. Later, you find the goat. It headbutts you in greeting. Things are back to normal, except maybe you. Because once you've seen what's out there, it never really leaves you. The goat's still judging you. You've only been home for a day, but something's shifted. Not just in you, though, you've definitely been changed by the experience of nearly dying beside a knight who bleeds dramatically, but in how people look at you. You're no longer just the person who collects firewood and occasionally trips over turnips. Now you're the one who left, who came back, and who might have stories they're not telling. Marjorie asks if you killed anyone. You choke on your stew. Tobias can't stop retelling the trip, though his version now includes a sword fight on a rope bridge and a talking crow that gave you directions. You don't correct him. It's kind of flattering. Your grandmother says nothing. Just looks at you longer than usual and mutters a prayer when she thinks you're not listening. You try to return to routine hoeing the field, fixing the roof, avoiding the bucket you always trip on. But the world feels different. Quieter. Or maybe you've just gotten louder inside. Then the steward shows up again. This time, it's taxes. He arrives with his usual entourage of books, attitude, and vague threats. Says there's been a reassessment. Says the Lord's generosity has limits. Says you owe more this year. For reasons, no one understands the reasons, least of all the steward. But that doesn't stop him. He reads from his scroll like it's scripture. Lists dues, obligations, fees you've never heard of. 3 sacks of barley, he says, and 1 chicken, and a levy for firewood, and a transport toll. You ask what's being transported. He smiles. Justice. You ask if you can pay with services instead. He frowns. What kind of services you regret everything immediately? Eventually, you strike a deal, half now, half in labor, which is medieval for you're going to be tired for the rest of the year. Later, you gather with your neighbors to compare unfairness. Everyone's been hit. Marjorie's being taxed for herbal consultations. Tobias apparently owes a singing tithe, whatever that is. Someone suggests petitioning the Lord. Someone else laughs so hard they nearly choke on a turnip. You all know better. Historians often debate how oppressive medieval taxation really was. Was it crushing, or just an accepted cost of feudal life? Some claim peasants could negotiate, delay, barter. Others argue the system was designed to keep you just above starvation, but never safe. You don't care about the debate. You care about whether your remaining barley can stretch through winter. That night, you sit by the fire, balancing coins in your palm. Not many. A couple bits of silver, some coppers. One that's probably just a button someone worshipped briefly. You think about Sir Lorien, about what it means to have a sword, to demand things instead of asking for them, to be owed respect because of what you wear, not what you do. You wonder what it would take to leave again. Not for glory this time, or adventure. Just to be somewhere no one asks for things you barely have. Your niece is playing by the hearth. She's tying bits of straw into a doll. When she sees you watching, she holds it up proudly. "This one's you," she says. "It's lopsided, missing an arm, covered in soot." You've never been so honored. You take the doll, place it by the window, a tiny, awkward guardian for a world that demands too much. The next day, the priest announces a tithe increase. Of course he does. God needs our support, he says. You think God should try living on stew and debt for a month, but you keep that to yourself. Instead, you hand over a coin, your last copper. The priest blesses you. You're not sure if it's worth the price. As you leave, you notice something carved into the church door. It's faint. Could be scratches. Could be symbols. Could be a message. You trace it with your finger. It feels old. Older than the church. Older than the taxes. Older than this whole place. That night, you dream of coins that bite and a church that whispers your name. Winter announces itself rudely. One day you're digging up the last limp onions, and the next, the wind arrives like it owns the place, slamming shutters, howling through cracks, and snapping laundry off the line with unnecessary aggression. The sky loses color. Everything turns gray, the clouds, the dirt, your hands. The cold slips into your bones and sits there like rent-free melancholy. You try to prepare. Everyone does. You stuff straw in the walls. Patch the roof with anything vaguely flat and waterproof wood. Cloth. That one disappointing pie. You pile firewood like it's gold. You wrap the goat in an old cloak. It hates you slightly less for it. The stew gets thinner. You start adding things that technically aren't food, but haven't been legally ruled out, either lichen, pine tips, a small suspicious root that Marjorie insists has a good crunch. You chew it like a dare. The animals huddle together. You do too. At night, the hut becomes a collective misery burrito, 6 people. One fire, no elbow room, and an occasional snore that sounds like the devil coughing. You miss the sun. You forget what it felt like to sweat. The days shorten. You wake up in darkness, work in darkness, eat in darkness. Sometimes, you blink and wonder if this is what the inside of a forgotten drawer feels like. You sleep more, not because you're lazy, but because there's nothing else to do. And because dreams are cheaper than entertainment, you dream of bread, real bread, crusty, soft in the middle, warm. You can almost smell it. Then you wake up to your brother eating the last of the actual bread. You consider murder, decide against it, barely. Historians say medieval winters were a test of endurance, not just for bodies, but for spirits. A cold long enough, a hunger deep enough it changes people. Or at least, it wears them down until all that's left is habit and the hope of April. Illness spreads faster. Warmth hides. The coughs return. They sound different in winter, heavier, more resigned. Less I'll get through this. More tell the saints I said hi. You keep the fire going, even when the wood is damp and the smoke curls into your eyes like judgment. You squint through the haze and pretend it's cozy. Sometimes, your niece tells stories. She makes them up on the spot about goats who run shops and pies that talk. You laugh, even when it doesn't make sense, especially then. It reminds you the world can still surprise you. One night, the cold breaks something in the hut. A crack opens in the wall. You plug it with your own cloak. It's not much, but it buys you a few degrees of mercy. Another night, a dog howls in the woods. Not nearby, but not far enough either. You clutch your stick tighter, just in case the cold brings more than wind. There's a saying when winter comes, even the ghosts stay indoors. You believe it, but you still whisper to the saints. You light a candle. You stare into the flame longer than necessary. Sometimes, you see shapes in it. Sometimes, you think they see you back. Marjorie gives you a charm made of pine, bone, and what you're almost sure is dried beetroot for protection, she says. You hang it above the door. The next day, the wind changes direction. You don't ask questions. Then, a letter arrives. Not for you. No one ever writes to you. It's for the steward. But you help deliver it because the messenger has frostbite and an attitude problem. You peek. It's a summons. From the Lord. Something about an inheritance. No one in your village has ever inherited anything except trauma. The steward leaves. The village exhales. For a few days, everything feels lighter. You build a snow figure. It looks vaguely like the steward. You accidentally knock its head off. Oops. Your niece laughs so hard she falls into a drift. You realize you're smiling. Later, you share the last apple. It's small, wrinkled, half bruised, but you cut it into pieces. Everyone gets a slice. You chew it slowly. You make it last. You tell yourself spring will come, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if everything is still cold, even if the stew tastes like bark and regret. You repeat it. Spring will come. The stew is singing, not melodically, not in any way that suggests music has occurred, ever, but it's bubbling in a rhythm that almost sounds like a chant. You stare at it. It stares back, possibly challenges you to a duel. You poke it with a spoon. It gurgles defensively. Marjorie peers over your shoulder. That's either ready or cursed, she says. You serve it anyway. That's how evenings go now. Simple things layered with strange energy. But tonight, something feels different. Because tonight, people are gathering. Not for a feast. Not for mourning. Just to be. The hut's too small, but nobody minds. You're packed elbow to elbow, knees to ribs, sitting on bundles of hay, overturned crates, and a very insulted goat. It's cold, but the stew helps. So does the cider, which is weak enough to be legal and warm enough to count as medicine. Someone adds herbs, someone else adds gossip. Did you hear about Tobias? Someone whispers. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what they're talking about, but the tone demands nodding. Turns out Tobias was seen talking to the widow by the river. Twice. Once about onions, once about fate. In this village, that's practically a proposal. Your niece claps with glee. She doesn't know what fate is, but it sounds important. Someone starts humming. Then another joins in. You recognize the tune. It's an old harvest song, slightly out of season and wildly out of tune. But somehow, that makes it better. You hum along. Marjorie starts tapping her bowl with a spoon. Rhythm emerges. One of the younger boys turns a stool over and starts drumming on the bottom like it owes him money. And just like that, there's music. It's chaotic, untrained, beautiful. You clap. You sing nonsense lyrics. You laugh when the goat contributes a perfectly timed bleat. This is joy, not the loud, shiny kind from stories, but the quieter, stubborn kind that grows out of cracks. Historians rarely focus on this. They talk about battles, famines, laws, but the strange, small joy of peasants, how they wove laughter into their survival, gets less attention. And yet, here it is. A woman tells a tale about a duck that got drunk and tried to marry a candle. It's possibly true. The details get fuzzy around the wedding vows. You're weeping with laughter by the time she gets to the reception. Your niece offers to perform a play. She assigns roles. Someone's the moon, someone's the sun, and someone's a very confused beat. You are, apparently, the wind. You blow dramatically. The crowd roars. Then comes the story time. Not official, not declared. It just happens. Someone leans forward. Their voice drops low, and everyone instinctively hushes. This one's about the old well. You know it. A spirit in the water, sleeping beneath the bucket, kind to the honest, cruel to the greedy. The moral shifts depending on who's telling it. Tonight, the spirit sings. They say if you leave bread by the well on a full moon, you'll hear her voice rise up from the water, soft as silk, cold as sorrow. She'll tell you your future, or steal your name. No one knows which. You shiver, not from fear, from memory. You once left bread by that well. Nothing happened. Or maybe something did. No one talks about it, but everyone believes in something. Maybe not ghosts, maybe not spirits, but in possibility. That the world is wider than the fields, deeper than the well. A few stories later, the fire dies down, the hut dims, people begin drifting out. You stand in the doorway, watching your breath cloud in the moonlight. A few stars peek through. Someone sneezes. The night quiets again. Your niece curls beside the hearth, clutching her straw doll. Someone covers her with a blanket. Someone else snores softly, already asleep on the floor. You sit down. The goat rests its head on your knee. And in that moment, there is no Lord, no taxes, no sickness, just the stew, the stories, and the soft crackle of wood. You think maybe this is what survival is made of. Not muscle, not strategy, but warmth, noise, and the way people show up for each other, even when they have nothing but bark soup and a shared complaint about the weather. You close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, you feel safe. The flood doesn't arrive like a disaster. It arrives like a slow, inconvenient guest who overstays their welcome and leaves your furniture damp. It starts with the river. You notice it first when the goats won't cross the little wooden footbridge. Goats, famously chaotic, don't usually care where they walk. But today, they sniff the air, turn around, and head back like they've just remembered an urgent meeting. Then the water starts creeping, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. A puddle here, a swollen ditch there. You joke about it at first. Maybe the river's decided to visit. Everyone laughs. But then the well overflows, and someone's garden becomes a soup bowl, and you find a fish in your turnip patch. Not flopping, just sort of sitting there, contemplating life, probably judging you. By the third day, it's serious. Water sloshes at your doorstep. You build a little wall of stones and mud. It holds for 8 hours. Then the water laughs and climbs right over. You move everything higher. Bedding, tools, firewood, the goat. The pig tries to climb onto the table. You let it. The chickens are furious. Their coop now technically qualifies as a boat. Your niece thinks it's exciting, a grand adventure. She names the puddle by the door Lake Sadbread and begins fashioning a raft from sticks and twine. You admire her optimism, but also maybe hide the good blankets. The worst part isn't the flooding. It's the squish. Everything squishes. The floor, the bread, your socks, your soul. The hut smells like mildew and regret. You sneeze 5 times a day. At one point, Marjorie suggests sacrificing a vegetable to appease the river. She chooses a radish with unsettling energy. You nod, mostly just to feel like you're doing something. Historians argue about the frequency of medieval floods. Some say they were rare. Others claim entire regions regularly became seasonal lakes. Either way, no one enjoys waking up to find their shoes floating next to their breakfast. The priest calls for a prayer vigil. The steward somehow back already declares a wet tax for damages to the Lord's lands. You consider inventing a shovel-based religion just to hit him with some spiritual clarity. Then the road collapses. Not all of it. Just the bit leading out of the village, which means you're trapped. No merchants, no travelers, just you, your neighbors, and the slow, spreading presence of water that now reaches halfway up your firewood pile. Your brother tries to build a drainage ditch. It becomes a moat. Your cousin attempts to fish from the front step. He catches a shoe. Everyone applauds anyway. That night, you all sleep on tables, stools, and the one bed that hasn't decided to start fermenting. You're wrapped in cloaks and blankets, perched like wet, miserable birds. You try to remember what dry feels like. You dream of sand. The next morning, it rains again. Of course it does. You don't scream. You just sigh in that deeply ancestral way and begin scooping water out with a bowl. Your niece joins you. Then the others. Soon the whole village is bailing bowls, buckets, hands, hats. It's pointless, but it feels like resistance. The river doesn't rise as fast today. That night, the clouds break, stars return, and a thin mist curls over the water, soft and silver. It's almost beautiful. If you squint, you sleep a little deeper. The flood doesn't vanish overnight, but it slows, recedes, leaves behind mud, broken fences, and a smell that probably has historical classification. You clean, you rebuild, you hang everything in the sun, pretending the stains are character. Your niece rescues a frog from the hearth, names it Damp George, trains it to sit on her shoulder. You don't question it. Sometimes, the best thing to do with a disaster is turn it into a memory. You survive. Again. Not because you're strong, not because you're wise, but because giving up takes effort, and you're too tired for that. Spring doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in quiet, tentative, like it's not sure it's welcome. One day, there's a hint of green on the trees, just a shimmer. You blink and it's gone. But the next morning, there are buds, actual buds. You whisper a thank you to whichever saint handles vegetation. The mud is still awful, but it's warm mud now. Optimistic mud. The kind that promises vegetables instead of emotional damage. The birds return, loudly. One sits on your roof and sings what can only be described as a judgmental ballad. You listen anyway. You're in the field again. Your hand's in the dirt. It's soft this time. Not frozen, not cracked. Just soil. Real, living earth. It smells like a future. You plant seeds with slow reverence. Onions, barley, cabbage, hope. You pat them down like promises. Your niece follows behind you, pretending each seed is a knight and the field is a battlefield. You let her. Her joy is fertilizer. The whole village seems to exhale at once. Windows open, brooms emerge. People shake things that haven't been shaken in months. Mats, cloaks, feelings. You find a shirt that isn't completely stiff with winter. You wear it like it's armor. Then, suddenly, the steward is back. He arrives with scrolls and smiles. It's tax season again. Of course it is. He says things are better now, so you must owe more. A flour tithe, a growth encouragement levy, a sunlight fee. You consider throwing a carrot at him, but it's your only carrot. The priest says it's a blessing to give. You say nothing, but you think many thoughts. You pay. Not happily, not entirely willingly. But you pay. Because there's food in the field now, and that changes everything. Historians debate how much power peasants really had, whether they were mere tools or vital gears in the feudal machine. But standing here, dirt under your nails, seeds in the soil, you feel powerful. Not because you control anything, but because, somehow, you keep going. You start seeing other signs of spring. Marjorie's herbs are growing again. She dances around her garden like the weeds owe her rent. The goat gives birth. 3 tiny, yelling copies of itself. You're both delighted and horrified. Your cousin finds a bird nest in his boots. He doesn't even complain. Your niece loses a tooth, declares herself an adult, demands voting rights. You make her an honorary village elder for 5 minutes, then revoke it when she tries to tax the stew. There's music again, not a feast, just someone playing a flute badly, off-key, slightly haunted, but it's music. You hum along. It feels like the world is forgiving you for winter. One morning, you wake up before the sun. You go outside. The air is still, but not empty. There's a hum to it. You can almost feel things waking up underground, roots shifting, water moving, worms plotting. You kneel by your field. Check for sprouts. You find one. Tiny, green, ridiculously brave. You grin. Later, Marjorie tells you about a dream she had. She was a tree, with arms like branches and a heart made of bark. She says it means something. You nod, like you understand. Then she offers you nettle tea. You drink it, because you've survived worse. That evening, the sky turns orange. Not fire orange, hope orange. The kind of sky that makes you believe in better tomorrows. You sit outside your hut. The pig lies beside you, snoring like it's composing a folk song. You count stars. You don't get very far. You fall asleep, right there, in the field, wrapped in spring. The road feels different now. Not shorter, not smoother, just possible. You're walking it again, but not because you have to. This time, it's your idea. Voluntary mud navigation, practically a luxury. You're headed to the next village over. Nothing dramatic. Just a message to deliver and maybe trade a few eggs for salt, if you're lucky. But still, it's a journey. You tie your cloak tighter. The wind isn't cruel today, it just wants attention. The fields stretch around you, green and gold, flickering with wildflowers that look like they could cure at least 3 kinds of melancholy. The sun is out. The sky is bluer than any pigment you've ever seen, and the birds are auditioning for the role of background music in a happy memory. You step carefully, like the earth might notice. Every now and then, you pass a landmark, an oddly shaped rock. The stump shaped like a bear if you squint, and also kind of forget what bears look like. The crossroads where someone once lost a cartwheel and declared eternal vengeance on gravity. It's quiet. Just your footsteps, the occasional rustle, and your thoughts soft. Wide thoughts that don't scrape or shout anymore. You realize you're not afraid of the woods today. You've passed through winter, flood, firewood quests, nights, plague, dancing turnips, and you're still here. That means something. Historians sometimes argue that peasants were passive, that they accepted what was given and never pushed back. But you've lived it. You know better. You've pushed back every single day. Against hunger, against weather, against rules made by people who've never been cold in a straw bed. You've survived not with rebellion, but with resistance so quiet it looks like endurance. And that's a kind of strength no scroll ever measures. You reach the village by midday. It's livelier than you expected. Children shouting, women hanging linens like flags of persistence, men arguing over pig prices. You recognize the tone, friendly rage. It's oddly comforting. You deliver your message. You exchange the eggs. You sit down by their well and breathe. A woman offers you a piece of fruit. Actual fruit. Sweet. Fresh. Slightly overripe. You eat it slowly, like a ceremony. Someone starts singing nearby. The tune's familiar. It's made its way from your village to this one, reshaped slightly, like gossip with a melody. You hum along. It feels like home. Then a man tells a story. He claims he saw a star fall into a field and turn into a deer. You don't believe him, but you smile anyway, because belief isn't always about truth. It's about possibility. You stay a while. Trade stories, trade news. Learn someone's uncle once met someone who once saw a sea. You ask what it looked like. They say, too much. You decide that's accurate. By late afternoon, you head back. The road's the same, but now you walk it with a little swagger, just enough to make the goat nervous when you get home. The sun dips low. The air smells like everything at once: grass, firewood, coming rain, old laughter. As you near your village, you see your hut. It's crooked, smoky, utterly unimpressive, and perfect. Your niece runs to greet you. She holds out a drawing, a lopsided stick figure beside a goat with suspiciously sharp teeth. "This is you," she says. You ruffle her hair. You step inside. The stew's warm. The fire crackles. The goat tries to eat your boot. And for the first time in a long time, you feel not just alive, but anchored. The seasons will turn again. The taxes will return. But so will spring. So will stories. So will you. Because this life, hard, ridiculous, mud-splattered, is yours. And you're not done with it yet. You're still awake. Aren't you? That's okay. Let's slow everything down now. The road's behind you. The fire is low. The air is soft. And the only thing you need to do right now is nothing. Maybe you're still picturing the fields, the pig, the stew that probably still has twigs in it. That's all right. Let them fade. Let them settle like ash on the hearth. You made it through floods and cold and taxes and goats and everything in between. And even though your boots were always damp and your back was always sore, you kept walking. You kept going. That kind of quiet resilience, that's a kind of magic. So breathe deeply now. Feel how heavy your arms are. How soft the bed is beneath you, even if it's just a couch or a blanket on the floor. Right now, this moment is yours. The world outside will wait. It's full of stories, of nights and nonsense and seasons that don't ask your permission. But you've earned your rest. Let the last echoes of the village fade out. Let the wind settle. Let the moon rise over that quiet little hut with the slanted roof and the goat that won't shut up. Close your eyes and drift. End of script. Sleep well.